Hello, my name is Paul Tranny, and I want to show you how you can do more than tick off a designer in 40 seconds. But this is obviously what you don't want to do, is use these crazy fonts. You have curls, papyrus, Comic Sans, stretching text. You know when you're doing it. Horrible color combos. Is it necessary? Of course, free clip art, especially that bad, obviously. You don't want to go too crazy with the bevel tool. Just because you have it doesn't mean you should use it. Kerning. Again, I see lots of designers doing that, making crazy words and not knowing when to quit. All right. So this is the sort of stuff that I want to show you how, like, sort of what not to do. And let's just kind of move along, because this really is 5 things every developer and designer needs to know about design. All right, these are tips that I need to keep in mind, because you want to make good design decisions. Not to pick too much on the Wisconsin Register of Deeds Association website, but you can obviously see you probably have somebody working on way too many websites and has probably multiple roles. I don't want this to be me. I want to make sure I'm not doing something that doesn't represent me or the company or client I'm working for well, okay? And it's across the board. I think this is funny. Bombshell 20, it was 2013 or 2012, and it keeps changing it. But nonetheless, this is awesome in how bad it is. All right. I'm kind of obsessed with this site, to be honest with you. And this guy is a very intelligent man. It's just that website design isn't one of them. And of course, this guy, I don't know what he's doing. Absolute nightmare. What is virtuality anyway? I have no idea. Okay, this is from 1997, though. So we're all guilty of doing these things. I'm not one to point a finger. I just want to make the best web content that I can. But does it really matter when it comes to design? Well, many studies kind of talk about this. You have, there's a study that was done a couple different parts of the world, actually. You had a well-designed ATM, and then you had a really, poorly designed ATM. So they're all exactly the same in form and in function, numbers, buttons, and everything. But one of them had screens that were arranged attractively, as you can see, and the others unattractively. And surprise, the Japanese found that the attractive ones were easier to use. So it goes on to say attractive things work better. And this whole report that Donald A. Norman, jnd.org, talks about, goes on to talk more about this. He not even goes to Japan, but he actually, they replicate this study in Israel with even stronger results. And I don't want to get into the emotional system that changes how the cognitive system operates or feels, but basically how you feel about something determines whether you think it works good or not. Okay, just how you feel about it. And that's what he gets into here. It's kind of hard to separate. If you get frustrated by a site, you begin to break down and you don't find those obvious buttons that you're looking for. And I can go on about this, but even as far as making what makes a site credible, you'd think it's a quote from Obama or whoever, president of some association. No, it's really the design look that adds credibility to your site or mobile design or whatever. It's really the design look, then the information design / structure, but it's all about how it looks, lends that credibility to it. Fascinating. Okay, so how do you design like a rock star, or at least fake it really well, right? It all comes down to the design fundamentals. So I'm going to take a whole, 4 years of my art degree, as well as, almost 20 years in the field, and break it down simply. Most important one is really layout, because you're given all this content. How do you lay it out appropriately? And it comes down to these design fundamentals. Your order, okay? You're going to have boxes of content. That's your order. Well, you need to be able to break it up with variety. So how can you have order and then add some variety to it? Contrast, making things stand out. Symmetry, great, balanced, stable, kind of boring, potentially. From there into tension, where things are tight, but not quite touching, just really close. Again, think about the creation of atom, lots of tension there. So that's a principle I don't use a lot. Balance is good, doesn't mean they have to be the exact same thing. Here we can have a circle and a triangle that are two different objects that are set up that way. Scale, oftentimes clients think to draw attention to something they have to make it big, and that's not necessarily the case. You can see the other previous dot is bigger. The black one is actually bigger than the green one, yet I see that green one first. All right. Texture is great if you have a lot of white space. Add some texture to it, just like they do, say, the linen texture on iOS, blurring out things, space, again, along with texture. So you have all these various things, and this is according to Rand, and various publications are all kind of around the same principles. But what do you do with all of this stuff? Like, what do you do with it? How do you break it? How do you make sense of it? And really what it comes down to is sort of your left brain and right brain activity. Your left brain bringing that order, that balance, that symmetry, that space, like everything adds up perfectly, makes common sense, the math. And then what do? You need to make sure you're using your left brain as well. Your right brain. Adding that variety and tension and contrast and excitement to how things are laid out. And this could be perceived as being, say, the body copy or the body of your page versus the header adding that excitement. I think good designs typically have these two things working together, stability and excitement. All right. And I can break it down into this test. Okay, so we'll just have a little fun here. This is all about leading the eye, seeing which composition breaks down by reads. Which letter do you read first? Well, the C, because it has the most contrast. You can see it right there. Size or scale, the C again. Pointing to it there, we see C with that color. Obviously, that shape, pointing right to it. And basically, C is the answer. Using that texture, again, with scale, using these shapes, pointing to that C, and scaling things, skewing them as well. But that's all about leading the eye. It doesn't mean that it has to be in the upper right-hand corner to draw your attention to it. And that's why all these principles are very important. Now, some developer tips for screen layouts. You have the golden ratio, which is 1 by 1.618, seen in nature. In human nature, actually, from your elbow to your wrist is your 1.618, and then your hand is the 1, your finger, constellations, art, architecture, even the human face. You see this ratio everywhere. But all this is really saying is to not split something down the middle. Divide it sort of your 1/3, 2/3. That's kind of how we got this grid system. We don't want to have two images fighting for our attention. We want a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. In fact, if I overlaid the golden ratio onto twitter.com, you would see it's actually split up perfectly. The column being the 1 and the 1.618 being the bulk of the content. I can show you a zillion other sites that go along that route, but let's go ahead and just see these principles at work. And this is just using Edge Reflow and what we would do with it. In fact, I'd have this content and I'd start to organize it and break it up. I'd want to make sure the content, again, is going to be organized by subject matter, trying to establish some dominance. This isn't very edited. This actually isn't edited at all. It's just sped up. But you can see how I start to tweak things, and I don't get things right the first time. I make plenty of mistakes, but hopefully I go back to correct them, and that's the big thing. So there you have it. You have your logo in the upper left. You have that image or whatever that box is going to be. Is you're going to be your variety. You have consistency. You have similarity going on here with 3 items, sort of the same size. You're going to have that similarity knowing that they're part of the same group. But that's how you can just take a stab at seeing this stuff come together. Now, when it comes to use imagery, you want to use it to communicate, okay? Not just to decorate a page. That's not why we're using imagery, okay? We might use it to add variety, but it's often just better to show than tell. Obviously here, I have all these pictures showing outdoor adventure and camping and things. You get the picture if I created a site with these images that it's all about adventure, even though you haven't read one word. Okay, pretty straightforward. Even more interesting is leading the eye with imagery. Here you just have some eye tracking where the red is where somebody's focused on the most, focusing on that face. Anytime you add a face to a design, you're drawn to it. Okay, that's what you're going to look at. Okay, what if we turn that face so it points to that text? Oh, look, what is that baby looking at? You can see how that transfer of attention is now taken still on the baby. I just get that message and then goes to that content. Okay, images are always going to be visually dominant. Okay, and it's great that I can have these visually sexy images that are going to make up my brand and start using them as icons. And we know what all these icons are: home search, help, mail, and man with a silly hat. Okay, not really. You get the idea. Using icons is essential when it comes to mobile, and using that affordance so people, of things that people already know about. Okay, so we have our icon we can use. Let's get into some of these shapes as we start to design some more. Which is easier to look at? You'd probably say the circle, right? Less sharp, pointy things that are going to poke me in the eye. And that's ultimately where we get these rounded corners. It's just easier to look at. It's actually easier on your eye. A square actually is really made up of 4 arrows that are pointing outward, which you don't want that either. But that's where that comes from. And just so you know, there's a difference between iOS 6 and iOS 7. In fact, they smoothed out that curve even more when it came to iOS 7. So that transition that your eye is making around those curves is even smoother, okay? Even easier to take in. There's a whole study that's done around that, okay? Take it to another crazy level. There's someone that's in Japan that figured out the iCloud icon is actually made up of 1 by 1.618. I thought that was kind of cool and crazy. But let's take a look at this site again as we play through it, me adding imagery to this content, and you will see it come to life. And I'm just going to scrub through this a little more. I've already added that background. Again, using Edge Reflow, seeing this content come to life, adjusting that text, adding that big image, and then start telling a story. Instead of talking about swimming and having that text, sure, I might keep that text, but let's show swimming rather than talk about it. And you can see how it breaks up that page. And there you have the final results. Again, we're moving along. We're going to see this design progress. Again, adding imagery to tell that story. Okay, so what about color? How do we use color appropriately? When we take a look, obviously you have a color wheel. What do you do here? You got to pick a color, all right? And what I would do is I'd pick blue because it's my favorite color. But colors have meanings. What does it mean to your brand? You can get into all this stuff. There's a reason restaurants are orange and red and in the warm color range because you want it to be warm and like you're going to get a hot meal. All this stuff sounds good, right? Enhances concentration, great. Royalty, spiritual, sounds great. You're not going to have a design that necessarily has all of those colors. You're going to go through and pick them, okay? But the thing is, you want to use color to emphasize importance, not just to decorate a page, okay? Even these slides, you might think they're boring, but I'm not using color just to add color. Everything has a purpose and a meaning, all right? And when it comes to picking colors, what I'd use is Cooler. So you can go to cooler.adobe.com to pick colors. First off, notice how I get these this color wheel that I could start to manipulate. And look, they're actually chained together because they're dealing with the color wheel and certain color principles, okay? They're adhering to those color principles. Sure, you can kind of mess with it. Yeah, that's fine. But really what I wanted to point out is these color rules over here. So I can pick complementary colors. I know if I have a site that has a blue, I know the complementary color is going to be an orange. Okay, so that's my base color might be blue, and then my pop of color might be orange. And the color intensity is different here as well. So it might be, it's like 8 parts blue to 1 part orange or yellow is how it goes. But this is how I'd pick a color, complementary, and I might even do a split complementary where it's 2 different colors. But really you want to adhere to these color rules, which I don't really have a whole lot of time to get into, but I want to make sure that everything is appropriate. In this case, this is the, the split complementary that you could go with, something like that. Again, not bad, needs some work. But really, I'm not just picking colors at random. I'm picking colors from something. So Kuler will actually let you grab an image. Again, this is an image from my site, and it will extract the colors from that image. So really, I'm not picking random colors. I'm sampling from an image I might be using. And I can always adjust these accordingly if I want to as well, okay? So overall, that's what I want to do with my design. Go with an established color, figure out the complementary color. Now, when it comes to the design, let's see what I do. Well, I do a whole lot of nothing here, because honestly, it already has plenty of color. I just would be adding color just to add color. Okay, it's fine. As I add more text, maybe I'll think about it if I need to have something pop, but overall, it's to draw attention to things, not necessarily add color for color's sake. Okay, using typography in the real world. Okay, so this is a straight up the not douchebag version of typography, right? And really all typography needs to do is convey information in writing. Okay, if the message is getting lost because you're reading this strange font, you're doing it wrong, right? There's 2 types. There's serif and there's sans serif. Serif, used in print, easy to read because of these little serifs, which are little curly things that hang off letters, sort of increases that spacing in between words. They're not all crammed together. And in fact, it guides the flow of letters, the R into the I into the F. It makes these separate, disparate letters one word. That's what makes them easy to read, okay? And if you can have something that can give you that detail of serifs, then go for it, which is often print. But to be honest with you, high DPI devices are great for serifs. As long as the serifs hold up, hey, use them. Okay, so I think we'll have a resurgence in serif fonts. But typically everybody's using sans serif. They're good for small text, for young and old. It doesn't break down, distinct letters, easy to read. And that's what everybody's using these days, right? Great for emphasis. You want to have that pop. Here's my letters, bam, and it looks great. So what font should you use? Well, there's a ton of different types. These are probably the most popular, and it varies, but you have Helvetica. Georgia might not be that large or desirable, but oftentimes it's the sans serif. And Helvetica Neue. Why do designers like Helvetica Neue? Why do I love it? Look at all the different weights to it. It's amazing. I can just go with Helvetica Neue, and I can pick a thin for large header text. And you can see how a lot of times it's taking those, 5 to 10 favorite fonts and then manipulating them for a design. Okay. So back to which fonts should you use? You'd use serif for headings if you want to, or sans serif, but sans serif for body copy. Don't use more than 3. And get into the breakdown of this. Most designers are using 60% sans serif, okay, for body copy and headings. Really, even if you forgot all that, you have Typekit. So let's take a look at Typekit. Typekit gives you the ability to sort by sans serif. So I'll sort by a sans serif. And you know what? If I need paragraph text, I'll sort by paragraph text. This is by type of files. They love type. They've organized these fonts for you. In fact, you want to go with a font that has multiple weights? Just start selecting all of those weights. And you'll notice, oh look, Proxima Nova would be a great font to use. In fact, I can select Use Fonts, and I can sync this directly to my desktop to Creative Cloud. Okay, so it's popping up here. It's going to sync them up. Proxima Nova, there it is. It's ready to use in Photoshop. So that's what I'd use Typekit for, to get a good understanding of type, headings, paragraphs, and the different types or classifications of fonts as well. All right, the last thing is getting feedback, okay? This is the most important thing you can do as a designer. It's really just have others help you. That's all I want, right? I want to stand on the shoulders of designers, of giants bigger than me, use something like Behance, where there's over 1 million members, and how I can send a design directly to Behance. So that's what I do here. You can see all my various works in progress. So I encourage you to follow me on Behance at behance.net/Paul Trani, because I've posted this design that I was working on, and you can see I got a good 32 responses, and they're very intelligent responses as I start to look at some of these comments. And even if I go back to the first one I did, there's a ton of comments as I get into it. They say it's very Windows 8 is what this person says, but they're kind of joking because they are a Mac fan, right? But overall, people were commenting on this part was not lining up. So they're giving me this critical feedback that I'm then implementing it, okay? And not only that, I'd want to turn around and start seeing all of this awesome work that's done on Behance to get me inspired, okay? Sure, this is a little crazy, but it's so awesome seeing these designers and their work and really helping me with my design when I see it. And as I finish up this design, I've taken some of their feedback. These boxes are actually lined up easier. I start rounding the corners, again, based on what I know as a designer. If I select this box, you can see I've rounded opposing corners, right? Because that's really hip and cool to do. And I'm doing this in Reflow. And then I had to make a reservation for a flight. But overall, you can start to see how this design starts to come together. I add a little bit of a drop shadow, and I never do it in black, but I just sample the background color just to have it pop off just a little bit. And that's kind of where I've ended up with the design, okay? So all based on that feedback that I got from designers on Behance. So to recap, use your whole brain when designing. Use imagery and icons to communicate. Use color to emphasize importance, fonts that support the content, and then get help from others. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully got a lot out of this. There's my info. Hit me up on Twitter. Thanks so much.